that it makes sense and that you're committed to it. And if it's not going to become a big part of your process, it probably doesn't need to become a part of your process at all. That would be my take today on that. But that just applies to all tools in general.
Yeah, I agree. If we go a little bit more specifically on AI, I think there are different flavors of AI tools out there, right? So for example, if we're talking about different co-pilot tools that sit in your like mailbox or on your Zoom calls, etc., right? The learning curve can be from like install the app and it's going to just run in the background to like, okay, how do I train it to kind of do the research properly, understand my tone of voice, etc. So I think the right way to answer this is when you're talking to any vendor, right, and AI vendor specifically, the question you should be asking is, what is your average time to value? And this is the question that we rarely ask in procurement, right? Like, when will I see first results? And then generally ask them in detail how the onboarding process looks like, right? Because something that I know in the AI AiSDR world for sure is that many of them take a lot of time to onboard, right? Because you have to set up the email infrastructure, you have to train the model for the specific messaging, et cetera, and you have to budget for it. With AI AiSDR, we take a little different approach, right? So we try to kind of make sure that the customer sees the results in the first months, and we like give you a dedicated customer success manager. But this is a very legit question, and you should discuss it in detail with the vendor you're interviewing, because it's different for a different provider. Okay, what do we have next? So many questions in the chat, some of them long, some of them short. So service desks are implementing LLMs and bots today. AI eliminates the middleman in everything. The same is happening in sales. Selling is a process, and LLM AIs are the best at learning and optimizing processes, including sales, from inbound to strategic B2B. But the large gravitational force is AI changing the way businesses buy. This will eliminate the entire selling process as we know it. What say you, right? Very long question, but essentially, to summarize it, AI is changing the way businesses buy and sell software, right? So are we being actually always living in the past by automating the sales outreach of today using AI? I know, Collin, would love to hear your thoughts first, and then I will kind of offer my perspective.
Yeah, so you actually opened my eyes and ears to a concept when I had you on my podcast, and you got me thinking about this. And I think I'm in the camp here that there's a few different ways to look at this, right? So on one hand, there's the sales process and the outbound motion. Like, how do we try to drum up demand, which is really the AI SDR piece, which some could argue is marketing, right? And if you remove the human from it, it's just sophisticated marketing, right? And so I think there's that piece to it. But then we have to think about the buyer side of things. And that's where you really got me thinking, because it's not just about how tools are going to change the way we sell. It's largely about how tools are going to change the way that people buy. Right. And it ties in so well to everything I've been preaching the last few years, which is that we're transitioning really from a hardcore sales model into a buyer enablement model, which means that what salespeople are doing is trying to enable buyers. Are you still hearing me okay? Yes. Okay. I wasn't sure if I cut out. I heard a little something there. And so what we need to think about is, if we make tools that make it easier for us to do the job we've been doing yesterday, that's good. And there's no downside to that necessarily, but there's going to also be companies that are looking to make it easier for buyers to find the right product. And, I would say like today's version of that is like G2 Crowd, or like the different, product hunts, or, those sort of types of review sites where you can sort of go and get some information. But, what really doesn't exist today is sort of a completely self-guided sort of sales process. And, I do think that there will be sort of neutral options that will be put out there. I think that there will be AI like what you're doing, and then there will also be AI like demo rooms and deal rooms and automated demo environments and things that people can put on their direct website. But then I think we will also see what you described as, I think, an AI buyer tool, which will be like a platform essentially that if I'm looking for a CRM, I could maybe go to this third-party platform. They're not affiliated with Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever. I can tell them what I'm looking for, and it can give me all of my options. It can break down the pros and cons of each. It can make specific recommendations based on the criteria I put in of my needs. And it can sort of do a lot of what the salesperson is really doing today. I think that's inevitable. It's just going to happen. And, ChatGPT is already being used in that way. So it's only a matter of time before somebody just makes that applicable to the buying journey. Does this completely replace salespeople? Again, there's no black and white answer to these questions. It will reduce the need for salespeople. I think that's the most accurate way to answer the question. It will replace salespeople in many scenarios. But let's take a step back and remind ourselves that it was almost 5 years ago that Gartner came out with their report, which I used for the foundation of my modern prospecting course, which was that buyers today, and this was again almost 5 years ago, we're getting 80% of the way through the buying journey before reaching out to a salesperson. Yeah. Now, what enabled them to do that? It wasn't necessarily AI, but it was the internet. It was just open source information. It was the fact that they could find so much more info, whether it was a demo video on YouTube or they're going on Reddit talking to your angry customers or happy customers, whatever. They're already choosing to figure out as much of this as possible before reaching out to you. So as new tools get introduced to the market that help them learn even more, they may get to a point where they don't reach out to you, right? And then there's a third piece to this, which is product-led growth, which is self-serve, right? And we're already seeing a lot of companies move in that direction. And there's a few reasons that's happening. One is technology is just getting better. It's easier to sort of create these beautiful workflows in the same way that it's easier to create, a good shopping experience on Amazon that we couldn't do on our BlackBerry devices, right? But you also have to think about, or wait, I just lost my train of thought there. Let me go back. Reiterate what I just said. I just lost it and I had something good.
Yeah, so you basically mentioned that the salespeople will kind of continue playing the role, right? And
yes. Sorry about that. So the tools will reduce the need for the salespeople. So there will be fewer salespeople, but there's still going to be salespeople. There's still going to be the instances where they're needed. And my hope is that we get to a place where salespeople can go from, maybe they used to run 4 demos a day, but now they can run 10, right? Because they have so much of that going on. Or maybe they don't need to run demos at all because people have already gone through much of that process and they're actually just coming to you with their final questions and all that sort of stuff. Oh, I remember exactly where I was going, which was the third piece, which is the PLG. And so, you're going to see a lot of models like Rome, who I also spoke to Howard Lerman on my podcast about this. And his whole model is like to basically not have salespeople, to do self-serve. And so you're going to see these different go-to-market strategies come about. I don't think it will be one size fits all. I think you will have companies that, do what Howard's doing. And he's like, I don't want to have a ton of salespeople because by not hiring a lot of salespeople, I can keep the cost of my product ridiculously low. And that's a huge advantage for us. And that'll make up for the lack of salespeople. And so I think you're just going to see companies choosing these different directions. And I'll wrap it up with that, which is that I would strongly suggest that you pick which direction you're going to go in and you build everything around that. Do not try to do the best of all worlds. That's where things are going to get messy. In the same way that I make the same recommendation for like remote versus in office, I tend to see when people are trying to do these hybrid things, it's tough. It doesn't mean you can't make it work, but you need a very rigid schedule. Like everyone should be in the office on these days and everyone's out of the office on these days, but where they try to do the whole, you can come and go as you want. It's like you're doing 2 different strategies and everything's all over the place. It's going to be messy. So I think that the answer to this question is really that there will be multiple ways to approach it, whether it's PLG self-serve, whether it's fully automating a sales motion, or whether it's having, human sellers. I think you sort of need to pick a lane and go with it. It doesn't mean there's not a little overlap. It's going to be some AI involved regardless, but yeah.
So kind of a few things that I would kind of add to that is that the evolution will happen, but it will happen over an extended period of time, right? So we are still in the very early stages in AI outreach and AI automation in sales. the saturation is going to take time, and the buying process will start transforming when the saturation is achieved, right? Basically, where all the outreach is AI, and people need something to kind of start analyzing that and build this kind of like buying AI, right? So that's kind of one point. The second, totally agree with you on kind of PLG and the fact that people want to buy on their own terms, not being sold to. And this is very much the case. And essentially, AI will enable, in my view, larger deals to be handled that way, right? So essentially, if you can jump on a demo with AI, knowing that it is essentially like prohibited to sell you, just to answer your questions and consult, maybe you'd be more interested, and essentially you'll be able to get a very personalized buying experience without actually being sold to and talking to like a person. So the ACV for the kind of self-serve business deals, in my view, will increase. And then kind of the last point is, at some point, there will be this kind of buyer AI and sales AI, which will be essentially like an AI marketplace for software. But then I have like an even bigger question is, if we're at that point, like, are people still buying software at all? Right? So this is kind of like futuristic. There is still way for us to go. And there will always be kind of companies with different stages of kind of technology adoption maturity, right? So don't overthink it at this time would be my advice. Yeah.
I can throw one last thing in there. One thing that has come to mind for me that I don't think I've heard really anyone talk about yet. We think back to when Google became a big thing, you know, SEO became very important, right? It all became about like, let's write a bunch of blogs. Let's find all these different ways to get our rankings. I think there's going to be a whole new wave of that when it comes to trying to get your product recommended by ChatGPT and all these AI tools. Like, how do you get it to sort of learn about your tools? And I think we're going to see a lot of people trying to figure out how to do that. And a large part of the marketing game is going to become about, you know, doing essentially what they used to do with the blogs, where they're trying to feed the data into that system somehow indirectly. And I think you're going to see some games there. And obviously there will be companies that program their AIs to have a significant bias towards recommending certain products. And then that will open up a market towards, you know, having one that promises you that it's unbiased. But I think there's going to be sort of a whole new wave of, I guess, SEO. It's sort of AI SEO. Maybe there's a whole company to be built there. It's going to need to be someone who understands how that data makes its way in there and how it gets prioritized. But I think it's going to be sort of a whole level of importance there. And my advice to companies today, and I'll say what you said, don't overthink it. Just do the obvious, which is start putting out as much information about your product as humanly possible. Forget about writing fancy blogs that people might enjoy reading, and write really detailed literature that dives into every feature and functionality and capability. Get that stuff published somewhere, even though a human may never read it. The AI hopefully will. And I think that if you are not publishing that stuff, you're putting yourself at a major disservice, because you're basically blind. You're like the AI is blind to what you do.
Yeah, make it ungated. It's going to benefit you regardless of what's going to happen in the future. So our next question is,